Welcome to the AgEmerge Podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monty Pottins. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Today, we are excited to welcome Del Ficke. Del owns and operates Ficke Cattle Company and Graze Master Genetics in eastern Nebraska. With more than 35 years of experience as both an agriculturalist and cattleman, he's consulted on farms and ranches throughout the nation and internationally. Today, Del shares his journey of embracing change, problem solving, and transitioning the dynamics of his farming operation to a more holistic system. There's a whole lot of experience and perseverance shared in this story, so let's get right to it.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the AgEmerge Podcast. I'm joyed to be joined by Del Ficke. Welcome, Del. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, that's awesome. I just want to take a minute to set up Del here a little bit with a special introduction. Del is a person who, when they see a problem, isn't afraid to tackle it, no matter how long that might take. So a lot of farmers out there, if you have a problem in your operation, you look at maybe building a tool that you can't get from an OEM or modifying things to fit for what your operation is. But not a lot of you are actually stopping and engineering something completely new, a new tractor or a new combine, and realizing that that might take, 20 some years to get to the destination that you hope. And I think that's something really neat about Del here is he took a look at the industry, and in this case, it happens to be those miracle machines that turn grass into steak, and saw that there was a real need to go a different direction. And over time, he's created a set of genetics, which is not easy to do in a hybrid, let alone in animals. And he's going to dive in and tell us more about that. But if you're a row crop farmer today, I definitely want you to listen to the tenacity and persistence and the vision that Del had as we're talking here today. And you just substitute that for your crop, whether it's almonds, tomatoes, corn, soybeans, wheat, and think about how you can look at farming differently and just really change the circumstances that you're in. So, Del, I don't want to take up all the time, but I just wanted to kind of introduce that so everybody listening can relate to what you've done. So I want you to take it away. Tell us your story and how you got started in farming and weave in the Graze Master approach and what all you've done.
Well, and I'll preface it by saying I can't tell anyone what to do that's right, but I can tell them everything not to do. And I think that's probably more important. And as you said, Monty, it takes a lot of time to change. I think I've been chronically changing, my entire life, even before I thought I was changing. And so my story comes as it's quite different than a lot of people, but it's still based on you have to change to survive. And when we think about, and I was there, many people have been there, how arrogant we were and we didn't think we had to change and all this. Well, you'll change or to change for you. You'll have to catch up with it because I've had a few good ideas. You've had a lot more good ideas. There's a lot of people that have had way more good ideas than you and I combined. And, those ideas set the stage to how everything's going to start changing and environmentally and everything. And so take a step back, go into the 80s. I was old enough to be a part of the 80s with my father. I never had a note co-signed by my father, but I co-signed my father's notes. I had a group of registered Hereford cows that were bought and paid for. I owned more cows when I was 14 than I do now. My dad's good friend was the banker in a small town of Melford where I went to high school, and I stopped by one day. I knew Dad was stressing some. He didn't have a lot of debt, but anything that that was out, that wasn't under control, was a big worry for my father. I just stopped in there and said, Alan, what can I do to help Dad? And he goes, well, you got those cows you can put up against it. He said, I said, do you recommend that? He goes, hell no. But he said, I know you're going to do it anyway. And so I did that. I got the chance to pay some 20% interest back in the day. I got to see the community basically, pardon my French, but go to hell overnight, and people committing suicide and just things that didn't need to happen. There was so much like a hyper profitability or a false profitability built into all that. Times weren't as good as everyone thought they were, and it looks a little bit like today. My gosh, things are kind of going crazy. Did we learn anything from the past or not? But sorry, that was a long part of how I got started into it. Always on the cow side. We had registered Herefords. My family did for several decades. In the 80s, I was tired of slow Hereford calves and needed a little bit more excitement in my life. We started working on some composite cattle and things like that, and build our Graze Master cow herd from that. So it basically took us 30 years of a lot of going through a lot of things that didn't work, a lot of breed combinations that didn't work, until we got to the ones that we feel is working as well for us as we can find. And of course that changes as we find other breeds that maybe can go into that. Then fast forward to the chance my cousin and I had to farm several thousand acres of ground. So several thousand acres in my area of the average farm size was probably 700 acres, and we were several thousand. Started no-till almost when I got out of high school in the late 80s, and thought that was the end-all cure-all. Thought we were doing all this great stuff. Yes, we were saving time, we were saving fuel, we were starting to save the soil, but it wasn't enough. And then started in, I think way back in 1999, doing some cover crops just for cow feed. The cow guy always just looks at it as cow feed. So the cover crop idea to a cow guy is an easy sell, because just like if it's a mistake, he's still going to graze cows or put it up for hay. No matter what it looks like, you'll put a fence around it and do it that way. And luckily in the beef business, I always said we can eat our mistakes. So everything that doesn't work is something genetically good enough, we can put in the freezer, which that was kind of the start of our little meat business. But I'm kind of all over the place, but we quickly found out that didn't work. When we peaked with all those acres is when the LDP deal came out on corn, and we were sitting on several 100,000 bushels of grain, and I think the corn price was $1.44. So you'll learn in a hurry that doesn't work. Was anybody giving us pressure that we had to get out? No, in fact, they were telling us we needed to get bigger.
Yeah, you make it up on volume, Dale, don't you know?
It's like the government, So I'll stay out of the government side.
Yeah.
But it really got me thinking. It got me thinking that none of that was making sense. And my dad was a great innovator and kind of fell into that industrialized deal. He was actually recruited by Roswell Garst in the 50s to sell hybrid corn through this area where they hadn't sold much. And then was 25 years with Pioneer and 25 years with the Garst family. He liked that innovation with the seed and everything. My grandfather, Adolf Ficke, was what I call a barefoot naturalist. He listened to the soil. He watched the plants. I followed him around all the time, and really forgot that for a big part of my life then. And then I had a series of back problems multiple surgeries that took me out of that ability to farm large scale. It also gave me the chance to go to college for the first time in my life when I was 30, and started out in radiology, and then ended up in coding and billing, hospital administration, and managed a medical clinic in Lincoln, Nebraska. So when you hear all these people coming in, and our front staff gals were all from the farm, and they were always coming back to me, but talking about how these city people really hate the farmer. And I said, well, they probably have pretty good reason. And they're like, oh, we're doing everything right. And I said, well, we're doing some things right, but we're really protectionist in the way we're doing things. And why are we doing that? If we're doing things so right, why do we have to protect or hide from people? My dad was still alive at that time, and I came, their house is on the same place as mine, and so I talked to Dad every night, and I told him, I said, boy, people don't have a good idea about agriculture. He goes, because they're spot on. He said they're seeing our struggles, or the struggles that we can't see. And why are we doing all this to the soil? Why are we doing all this? Why are we raising cattle in places that maybe aren't the best? And so that really blew the doors wide open. I'm smart this way. I left a really good paying healthcare position to go back and start working for a nonprofit. I think I made about a fifth as much as I did at the clinic. So, I mean, that made perfect sense to my dad. He's like, well, why wouldn't you do something like that? And he always said I couldn't stand prosperity. I always had to be doing something to teeter on the edge of that. And worked for a nonprofit that served farm and ranchers with disabilities in Nebraska for 7 years. But during that time, started to build this whole program. Really started to learn about soil health. I was always a cow guy, but boy, you could see where those cows had been, that it was better. And so I'm not a soil scientist. I'm a soil romantic, and I'm chock full, like I said, of things that I know won't work. And I think that's a big part of the Graze Master group, that we took the name from the breed of cattle and their adaptability, and kind of swung it into our group that goes out and consults and does education and has things like that, because we knew we could do adaptable things any place across the country. And so today, I mean, we work with the Goro Carbon Alliance on some stuff. There again, it's something that can add some value if these guys are going to do it already. Does it fit everyone? No, but it certainly fits a lot of our customers or a lot of our clients. And the educational component, and then really why we wanted to put the Graze Master Group portfolio together was, and you'll know this too, Monty, back in the day when you were starting to switch, there wasn't a lot of places to go to get information or ideas on inputs. Everyone said, do it this way or do it that way, but who did you call? Everybody I called didn't know what I was talking about, which is kind of still like today. Never mind that. That was a bad example. But we just wanted to have a group of people together that if they needed somebody to figure out farm ranch succession planning, they call Kirk in our group, or we don't really sell. The Graze Master group doesn't sell anything. We just have like a Main Street community deal of, hey, talk to this guy, and I'm really hell bent on bringing those communities back to life, because at my age, I got to see the vibrancy of those communities when I was young. And then through the 80s and early 90s, got to see them all boarded up. And so I truly think I have a calling in this. I may come off harsh sometimes to people. My dad said shortly before he passed away, he said, "You've really made it." And I'm like, "Oh, that's good." I said, "I'm glad somebody said I really made it." He goes, "Well, you can tell people to go to hell and they look forward to the ride." And I'm like, all right. So So my philosophy of maybe kicking them in the butt, but giving them a hug when we get done, it's a tough love deal, but we need that. You know, I equate what farmers and ranchers are dealing with is, you know, they suffer from the Stockholm syndrome. I did, you did. We all were friends with our captors that were trying to just sell us something. Are those bad people? No. But I'd like to put every one of them out of business so they could go back to a farm or ranch and do exactly what they want to do. So, sorry, that was a really long answer to a very short question.
Nope, that's exactly what we wanted, and that's what our listeners enjoy hearing is just what got you to where you are and the why behind what you do. And there's a lot to unpack here. So I've been taking some notes as we go along, and I thought one of the things that you said in there, you know, here at the end, you talked about the Stockholm syndrome, but protectionist farmers. And I thought that's a good quote. And if you really look at it, you know, there's everything that we're doing as farmers is we're being taught we're the right thing. We're sustainable. We're, you know, looking out what's best. We're 96% family owned. You know, so the Farm Bureau is really, you know, promoting us to try to keep us doing what we've always done. And all the industry is very interested in us continuing to do what we've always done because that provides stability. So tons go through a fertilizer plant, gallons go through a chemical plant, units go through a seed plant, because all of these assets have to get paid for over time and shareholders expect returns. But talk a little bit more about what your dad said to you about they are spot on. You know, when I think a lot of times as farmers, we just instantly say, "Oh, no, that city person doesn't know what they're talking about." Now, there's probably some that they don't know what they're talking about, and there's probably some things we're doing as farmers that's really good, but there's probably an 80% range in there that maybe we're not quite 100% right on. Dive into that a little bit more and the Stockholm syndrome in your perspective and what you see going on there.
So I'll go back to what you said. You know, all these things provide stability, but they don't provide stability for you and I or our friends on the farms or ranches. They provide stability for people making money off of us. And I'm going to ruffle feathers here because, you know, there's a lot of people making money off of you and I and our friends that it doesn't set well with me. And so if I can give them any type of alternative opportunity to really start living for themselves and doing the things that are really right for their farm or ranch, that's what I want. And, you know, we get so ingrained and it's always been done this way. We have to buy more land for the next generation. We're creating a legacy. Well, maybe not a quote that I'm super proud of saying, but I still get a kick out of some of the stuff I say. And there was a guy talking to me one time. He's like, "I'm buying this." After we looked at his land, and I said, "Boy, your soils are really, you know, really degraded." He goes, "Well, it's not just mine because I'm doing good things. I'll make it better." And I'm like, "Actually, what we've been doing has made it worse, but, you know, we didn't know there was other ways to do it or all this." He goes, "Well, I just continue to buy land for my kids." And I'm like, "I don't think your kids are probably going to farm." I was looking at them. I'm like, they look like they're too smart to farm. Probably they're going to go do something really, really cool. And I said, we get confused with legacy and we get confused with that we've done a good job with the soil that we have it. And he's like, "Well, give me an example." I said, "Well, if you treated your kids the way you've treated your soil, they'd probably come and take your kids away from you." And that was the light bulb to be like, I'm really not doing a good job. Now, was it his fault? No, because I said that I thought I was doing everything right. synthetic fertilizers, or just keep pouring it on. And, we need that. Back to the part of the question, we're all in this together. The city people, the country people, we're all in this together. Just like here in Nebraska, it's going to be a huge deal over water in not too long. And when I was a kid, I got to travel with my dad, who went all over the country to learn things about agriculture. And I got to go to some places in Texas and New Mexico that, they were saying already in 73 or 74 that, you guys are going to run out of water. And they're like, no, we're not. It's our water. We're going to pump it, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's the same area you drive through now that the pivots are growing up in weeds. So it's coming to a town near you, if you believe it or not. And, but back to it, we're all in it together. God gave us all of this to do a good job stewarding it, but also to do a good job of sharing it. And so it's hard for me to place ownership on anything. So I kind of resonate more with what the people, like the lady in New York City that has one tomato plant, I've always said knows more about soil than most farmers. She touches it. She understands it. And we've just had a huge lack of understanding that maybe the urban sector has said, hey guys, is there a better way? And, the American farmers, the most independently, supported, person, through the government, these people it's left a bad taste in their mouth. It's their money that's keeping a lot of these operations going. And we shouldn't have to have money to keep, if we're doing a good thing with the soil and raising good plants and healthy animals and healthy kids and communities, we don't need all that, but we're stuck in that. So there again, long answer.
Well, I got to meet Tom Robinson lately. He's a farmer from Australia, and he likes to poke a little fun at us U.S. farmers. And he was saying that in Australia, we have a great way to sort out the bad farmers. He says, we don't have any government programs. So he says, there's only good farmers left. And there is something to that, and all of those things align. But back to the thing, as far as I think when we hear as a farmer, we hear people maybe criticizing and giving us a little hard time that are not in farming, but they're eating food, right? Mm-hmm. They're our customer. We need to listen to them, not dismiss them, and realize that, yes, they may need some education, but honestly, we may need some education. We may have some things. So I think it boils down to people don't like to be wrong, and nobody likes to be wrong, right? And nobody likes to be told they're doing the wrong thing. That's just human nature. We don't want to we don't want to be wrong. So I think that's a key to that. So I think it's okay to be, quote, chronically changing, as you said earlier, and question what you do. So how are you comfortable with, quote unquote, chronic changing? How did you get to that point, and how would you encourage others to not be afraid of doing the same thing all the time?
Well, I think I'm just really good at making mistakes, and so I have to go with the only thing I'm really good at. And our motto around here is we're not making mistakes fast enough. And
why is that okay to make mistakes? I mean, most people have been told that you don't want to make mistakes. You want to get an A, on the grade. You don't want any wrong answers. So, I mean, that's conditioned into us. But talk about, what is that value of a mistake?
Well, for one thing, your life would be pretty boring if you weren't trying new things and constantly making mistakes.
Honestly, mine could be a little less exciting, to be truthful with you, Del.
Yeah. Well, I've got a lot of days like that too. It's like, wow, I don't know, that old way looked a little easier today. When you're rolling up polywire in an ice storm, or you're doing all that kind of crazy stuff. But it is okay to not, and maybe making mistakes is too harsh or too honest. But this country was built on innovators. The industrialists and everything. We have to think about what we've done here. We did it so much faster than many other civilizations. Unfortunately, we've degraded our soil or depleted our soil and water faster than any other civilization. So we hold that record too. But if we don't make mistakes, if we're not constantly trying something new, you're never going to feel that you're living to the fullest. So I don't ever want to go out and look at the same thing or do the same thing twice. I can't do it that way. And I did, and it's okay. But we have to really have a rebirth of the innovators and cooperators and neighbors that made this country great. Everything is cyclical. Everything has been done before. The cool thing about, if we talk about regenerative agriculture, or we like to call it responsible agriculture, most of it's been done before. Now we've got some new cool technology thrown in there. Cover crops have been around for hundreds of years. Grazing has been around for millions of years, whatever, So it's important. And as I look at my hundreds of books in my bookcase that are probably going to fall and kill me during this podcast, is we have to continue to study history, but not just ag history. We have to study the whole civilization and the process. Maybe throwing a little poetry or something like that in too to spice it up. But we've made a lot of mistakes already that we don't need to make. So the mistakes that we're making now need to be new and fun. Okay, new and fun mistakes. That's the motto today. That's our theme. Because it is, I think about, I would have walked away from this ag deal, should have probably several times. But when we started doing the cover crops and really the soil health deal and all that, it's like a drug. Just like soil is a drug when you're smelling it and the beauty of it and everything it does. This agriculture doesn't have to be boring. I don't have a tractor that I can let go of the steering wheel successfully. We only have one tractor, and it's a 79 John Deere 4240 with a loader that we use from time to time. And my creativity has to be walking across that soil or seeing a group of livestock grazing, seeing my granddaughters going through those prairies that we've brought back, and seeing that hope. I'm not doing any of this for me. My generation, your generation, Lonnie, we're done. I mean, we'll have enough water, we'll have enough healthy soil to raise food and stuff. But my granddaughters and those generations, that's why I'm doing all this. And I'm pretty hardcore, and it has to be for those generations, not the generations before us. People get hung up on, I'm 10th generation, I'm whatever generation. Man, we screwed up a lot in all those generations.
Yes, we did.
And now is our chance to do something right by learning from those mistakes.
So we like to call it making farming fun again. And we've had that comment from several of our customers when we're working with them. They're, I remember a good friend of mine, they were two brothers looking at retiring, and they just kind of become disinterested didn't have family or coming into the farm, and just, we're just kind of doing the same thing, different day. And we started working with cover crops and advanced nutrition practices, and they were having fun, and they decided to keep going for another, 8 or so years, and then retired just because it was time, and but it's true. There's things that we do that makes it fun versus just a recipe to execute. I'm doing what the co-op told me to do, and I'm just a tractor driver that is responsible for some really big notes at the bank. And so I think there's a different mindset there.
The AgEmerge Podcast is brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. The ASN team is hands-on, digging in and invested in regenerative agriculture. Along with the proper plant nutrition and biologicals to boost your soil microbiome, we provide the ideas and implementation guidance to support you on your soil health journey. So stop farming the same way and contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm.
All right, let's get into some more nuts and bolts. We don't want people to overwork our brains here too much just yet. But okay, so 30 years to get to the Graze Master genetics. So 30 years later, you're an overnight success with this, right? So
in my own mind, yeah, in my own mind.
So talk to us about your decision to go down this path. Obviously, lots of mistakes involved. You had to talk and work with lots of people and, observation, sort these things out. I'm sure you created some lines that went off the wrong direction, and you had to start over or, call them out. Just talk about that process of experiment and fail, experiment and succeed, and where Graze Master genetics are at today.
So where we're at today is we started a little meat company that based off of this breed of cattle, and I'll go from where we're at and then back. We nearly all of our animals go into our meat company now. So I kind of worked myself out of the genetic side as far as selling those, but not as far as advising or recommending different breeds. I'm a full-blown heterosis, crossbreed, everything like that. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. Like I said, my dad sold seed for Pioneer back in the day, but in the early 70s, they had a cattle herd, and they started one of the first composites. I got to be by my dad's side and learn, pretty early that those crossbred cows stayed in the herd longer. They took less feed. They weaned a heavier calf. All that kind of stuff. The calves were more vigorous and all that. And this was coming out of a family operation that was registered Herefords. And so I'm not just bashing the Herefords because I still have Hereford in our composite, but it's always like, when you see something you can make better that you have the power to do, you just need to do it. And so our cow herd, we went from corn silage. My dad, oh my gosh, he fed cows, and a lot of corn silage and calved when it was cold, and that's what you were supposed to do. And then we hauled manure all summer onto wheat stubble, and it was job security.
Now, hold on. That's what you're still supposed to do. Haven't you got the memo? They haven't changed that. That's still what you have to do. You're right too. So you have the ability to use copious amounts of protein and feed and manpower and bragging rights. Who doesn't want to brag about going out at 2:30 in the morning and saving that 100-pound calf and putting it in the truck and then bringing it in mama's kitchen? And I mean, the romance of the cowboy just has no end, and it probably should in those situations. And we've done all that. I'm not bashing people with what they're doing. I'm just saying, hey, there's a better way. And it took me a while to figure that out too. So seeing, that composite deal and everything, while we were still running registered Herefords that, they're a little bit slower when they were born, and cows, didn't last quite as long, and brings me to where we're at today with a really high percentage of Angus cattle. Why hasn't crossbreeding, even though it's becoming more and more, popular, why couldn't the beef deal really get that going? Well, a lot of it is the old breed society mentality of, England and those places. But
Um, the cattle side, just like the crop side, is a continual dangling of the carrot. If you do this, if you pay us a little bit more money to run the EPDs on this calf, or if you do this, you're going to have a better cow herd. When we do enterprise analysis on some of these cow herds across the country, they are hemorrhaging money so badly. They're spending big money on bulls that are basically the same thing they got in their own cow herd, and they're not really looking at the possibility of using a different breed on it and things like that. So the Graze Master deals is not it works perfect for us, okay, and it can work well in other people's programs with some tweaking. Whatever cow herd they have that's acclimated, they want to use some crossbred bulls, or if it's a Graze Master, if it's some other hybrid bull or whatever, is what we want to figure out for them. But in the beef deal, we leave so much on the table so we can have a crazy, ridiculous story to tell. It's like I had to feed these cows for 9 months, and that was on a good year, and these cows are too big, or they're too all this stuff that those old cowboys 100 years ago would have never tolerated cows that we have today. They didn't pamper cows. Cows were cows, and that's where we got back to. I mean, our cows run out, they get some hay, but 60% of the hay we figure goes to feeding the soil, 40% to the cow. And we built a lot of soil doing that. But my dad, before he passed away, he got to see me change the cow herd to his dream cow herd. Calving in the summer, calving in May, and wrapping up that first part of June, not touching a calf, no wormers, no poron, basically very little vaccination of anything. And he's like, it could be done. And he was always like, he wanted to do it, but he just could never quite get, the courage, or I don't know, he probably didn't want to offend his friends that he was buying a lot of feed from. Who knows? I don't have a lot of input people stop by anymore, so I don't consider them my friends, but I'd sure like them to be my friends if they wanted to be. But it's crazy, the mentality we get caught up in. And if you can't break out of all those different boxes in the livestock industry, it's going to be hard for you to break out of any type of boxes, because you really are controlling more of your own destiny with livestock than with anything else. And God did not mess up something that grazes. He built the perfect, like you said, the perfect fertilizing machine, the perfect grazing machine, the perfect meat food machine. And I blame that back on the 80s too. That's the first thing those bankers told those guys to sell were, the hogs and cattle were liquid, get them off the place, pay down those notes. Well, the factory went away. And when people tell me how great an investment combines and tractors are, I said, the only problem I have with them, I know they're needed, but they never have baby combines and tractors. And so that's hard for me to get my head around now, when a cow can go out and have a calf on her own, bring it into the fall and things like that. So we've taken a lot of God's beauty and really messed it up. And my intent is just try to bring some of it back. When I say my prayers at night, it's like, God, I'm just trying to get it back to some of that beauty, and he's probably thinking, well, you guys messed it up, but that's the whole part of why we're doing it. I would love to get it back to the state of the garden. Who knows what that looked like, but I know it looked a hell of a lot different than it does now.
Well, the good part is when, I personally decided to bring livestock back to the land. I didn't have any experience with it. So the cool part is I could just start, with May, June calving and no porons, no dewormers, no vaccinations. I mean, all this stuff. I just started there. So transitioning to that, it is tough. Okay. So talk about your roadmap a little bit. I mean, moving from February calving up to May calving, that's not too hard to do, and maybe you do that over a few years. But how did you how did you start doing less of the input based? So the pharmaceuticals, were you cold turkey? Did you phase it over time? How did you make that approach?
Well, I'll give a lot of credit to cover crops. So, which it sounds crazy, but when we started getting the soil health going in the right direction, starting to raise a lot of cover crops, and with the ability to graze on those covers, even though the last 2 years have not been good, we've been too dry to raise much of anything, but that happens. That's life. We'll be rolling again someday, but it's crazy how I think our original aha moment was probably 12 or 14 years ago when we started to fence line wean. I read this article and my dad was talking about it, something about the year before, some calf crawled over, whatever. And he said, I couldn't get that damn calf on the other side. And there was just a hot wire separating that from the cow. And I'm like, okay. So we started to put some cover crops in these paddocks that were close to the place where we have some grass too. And normally we'd wean in the dust or the mud. 2 weeks later, you were giving everything shots, just like clockwork. They had pneumonia, dust pneumonia, or pneumonia because it was cold and wet. And when we started to do that first year, we treated no calves. They were grazing beside those cows. Go ahead.
So you were fence line weaning putting the calves into the diverse cover crop mixes, correct? And leaving the cows on the grass. So the additional nutrient variety and availability and high energy status of those cover crops compared to stockpile grasses allow them to stay healthy.
Oh, absolutely. So, and they're grazing all the time. So when they're grazing, all that stuff that's normally clogging up their sinuses is draining out. They're comfortable because the cow is right there. Mama wasn't 2 miles away where they could still hear her bellowing. Normally, in one day, we have all the cows, they're done bellowing. But they're still close to those cows, but they're grazing off. But when we saw those cows on some of those diverse cover crop deals, we'd still have hay feeders set up and all that. They didn't touch it. We were still trying to give them some pellets or something. They didn't touch it. And my dad's like, I think we're on to something. And I remember he kind of threw the 5-gallon bucket joyfully into the corner of the machine shed. And I knew then, it's like, Dad's okay with this. Dad's like, why in the hell did I do this for 60 years of my life?
I think people are okay with not buying, mixes or hay. That works out all right. My experience the weaning thing. I've tried the haul them a mile to 5 miles away. I've done the nose paddles. While that looks fun and ridiculous, still they fall off, and then you've got some that are weaned and some aren't. We've done all that, and we went to fence line weaning last year, and the calves, because we're weaning at 10 months. Okay, so there's not a lot of milk going on. Big animals grazing, big calves grazing a lot anyway. They could care less. They really could care less. They were all together with their buddies. The worst thing was the first few days, is mom's hurting. She's at the fence calling to them saying, hey, get over here. It's a little painful, but the calves really, they could care less. They see each other, look at each other, but I mean, they would walk over the hill. And the mothers are just, they were just trying to, they weren't, I wouldn't say they're nervous about them. It's just, after you're not milked for a day or two, you start to hurt, I suppose. But it honestly, super simple. And we definitely continue doing it that way.
It's a good way to do it. Unfortunately, this year we didn't have any cover crops growing, and we kind of modified a little bit. We ended up seeing without that really natural environment that it can revert back pretty fast. We had a few calves that we ended up having to treat, which was something, I mean, we hadn't done that in years. You forget what you're doing there.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
The other thing you could have done too is maybe, left some stockpile for weaning and drop a temporary 2 or 3 wire through there. So you got kind of a physical along with, hot wire and just let them go out on pasture for the process and then bring them back. And I mean, it's, we specifically save a pasture with stockpile for that process. If we run out ahead, we'll hay feed ahead, then we bring it. But, it just requires a little, and that was a great reminder, and I'm glad you shared that. So people who are, doing the fence line weaning, keep that in mind. So,
and normally, our only trouble is we had went through the stockpile of grass that we were going to wean, just trying to keep as many cows around the place. And so you go from all these beautiful deals that work great on really good years to, hey, we're survival mode. We got to do this.
Order your rain better, Dale.
I know.
For crying out loud, you need to order it more regular instead of.
I know. And there again, mistakes. But just going back to that, it's everything was a change for the better. But the fence line weaning started that whole process, and then I remember the first group of cows we didn't pour when we paired. That's when we were still pairing out, calving in the pens and pairing out on the grass. And I got home and my son had paired out 6 or 12, can't remember. I think it was a dozen pairs. And I said, "Did you pour those?" We were always pouring them as they got on the trailer. He goes, "Oh crap." I'm like, "Okay, the next ones we're not going to pour, or we're going to pour the next ones because we've got our control group here." And ironically, the same day that the ones that were poured got their hair coming back, the cows we didn't pour, their hair came back. So it was nature.
Ta-da.
And I said, "We're done pouring and worming and all this." And I remember my vet saying, "You're going to have cows fall out. They're not going to get bred." I can remember one cow that her hair was a little scruffy. She didn't fall out either, but our cows haven't had anything like that in, 12 or 15 years, and they look amazing.
But the reality is, if they did fall out, think about this, everyone. If you had 1 or 2 that fall out because you didn't do a pour on, they had lice stress or worm stress, guess what you just selected for? You selected for the 2 that are not adapted to your program.
Yep. Which it's really vice versa.
You know what I mean?
The whole agriculture deal is set up for the weaknesses to keep everything going. And that was the biggest favor that could happen when cows fall out of the program. That it's just, it makes you money. It looks like, oh gosh, my 2 best cows are gone. They weren't your best cows.
No, they weren't. They were in your mind, but not in nature's mind. And nature's the ultimate judge. So just think about this as farmers. If you had a hybrid that was just your favorite and it had Goss's wilt, or if it had tar spot, or if it had gray leaf spot, or, pick the disease du jour. Okay. And all of a sudden, even though it was your best, you'd be, "Oh, I don't want to plant that because it's more susceptible to XYZ. We do that all the time, right? So it's the same kind of thing. Okay, so Dale, you're telling me that you came to the realization that families and restaurants don't buy cattle, they buy beef, right? So you realize that maybe we need to do something a little more than just 4 legs. We got to take it to something that people can eat. Tell us about your journey there on selling.
So Mom and Dad had always sold, some quarters, halves, stuff like that. And, we had the chance, because we're located so close to Lincoln, Nebraska. We're 14 miles from Lincoln and we're 70 miles from Omaha. Our location is perfect for a local meat deal. What really got us going is, we were talking about we're starting this meat deal, and this is how we're doing it differently with the soil and stuff. And then because of our location, people would want to come out from town and go on tours. And so, we never passed up anyone that wanted to bring their family out and go on tours and look at this. And back then we weren't 100% grass or forage based deal. We were on grass or covers and still feed them a little grain. And these grass-fed consumers would come out and we'd say, "Well, this is a deal. They're still getting some grain. We're getting them some sorghum back in those days." So I said, "They're not 100% grass-fed or whatever." And they're like, oh, this is beautiful. They're in such a nice place where they're being raised. They're not in a feedlot. They didn't care about the grain part at that point. Now, we moved away from that just because, in our natural quest to do all that, we did. But it was really an eye opener on people care a lot about how things are treated. And we would equate that back to even the soil. Everyone has to smell a handful of soil when they come out. We have to talk about it. The kids have to dig around. We have to do all that. But when they started to see the better the soil, the better the plant, the better the animal, it's a no-brainer. And so then that just really took off. One person, we never did any advertising to speak of. One person told the next person, and here we are. And it's something I probably wouldn't have pursued, but my son and daughter-in-law, my daughter-in-law is from Temecula, California, and she's another one like you, Monty. When she got here, she thought the way we were doing it was the only way to be doing it. She goes, why are people doing it that other way, in farming? Or she goes, I don't even understand. It doesn't make sense. So she didn't have to go through all those hoops of retraining or unlearning. But they pushed it, the meat deal's her deal. And she's taken it to a new level of, those soccer moms, and, she's dragging meat all over and stuff like that. But it's really still based on our story of how we changed our farm. And we didn't just change it for us, we changed it for those people too.
No, that's great. And plus it provided an opportunity, right? So
yeah.
your daughter-in-law would not have had that opportunity in a conventional farming operation, right? And you create, I think farmers with their protectionist views of feedlots and those kind of things, you are creating a dead end opportunity because there's just sometimes you can't get big enough to bring in the next person. The capital doesn't work because of low margins. So you have to rethink and reinvent yourself.
And I just had this conversation. Ward Labs in Kearney, they're one of our Graze Master partners now. And so we're talking to those guys constantly. They all buy meat from us. They all love that meat. And but when you start thinking about there's so many things that you don't need to be doing to raise a really good product. And they can see that in their testing. They can see that through how we're doing it on the cover crop deal. But it's just it blows your mind when you this, let nature take its course and we stand back and watch it. It's a beautiful thing to have happen, and you've got to see that with your own program. But it equates to better products and better things for people.
Before we have to go here today, I wanted to visit a little bit about your work with the Global Carbon Alliance, and also you had a brief stint with Indigo Ag, talking a little bit about the carbon markets and what that's all about. Backfill what's going on there, and then I want to bring up a larger issue in regards to ESG and an idea I want to float by you to test for validation. So talk to us a little bit about opportunities for farmers and carbon and what you're doing with the Global Carbon Alliance.
Well, and I've had I guess a lot of exposure to carbon markets. Yes, I worked with Indigo a few years ago as a regenerative ag consultant and got to do a lot of things there. The Agoro Carbon Alliance was something we really sought out, and we really studied, because we've probably been through 30, almost 40 companies of due diligence or hands in there some way on the carbon side. We love the people, but it was the only carbon program that identified pasture and rangeland acres. And I tend to be hard on my row crop buddies, and they're making all the money and getting all these perks. But there's a little something to that. The livestock guy never gets any perks to speak of. And the things that they were asking to have changed were the things that everybody wanted to change anyway. So if I could have something to offer these farmers and ranchers on this pasture and rangeland deal, that's what I wanted. Now, Agoro still does it on the row crop side too. We put acres like that into it, but it was really like your hardest deal to do in all this change is it doesn't take as much capital, takes different capital at a different time that isn't generated in the same way that conventional agriculture can generate capital. That was kind of a crazy thing to say, but with that being said, a program like Agoro has, you can tailor make it. You can get all the money at the end. You can get some of the money up front, some of it at the end, or you can take part of it, to go do something right away. And that's where we were really stuck in our own operation. We needed a different watering system to really maximize our grazing. And we needed some stuff like that just financially, when you crunch the numbers, it wasn't working. But when somebody comes in and says, hey, we want to pay you for the cool stuff you're doing or starting to change and give you this money, and so I can take that and start something else, you just have to do it. It's just a no-brainer, because if you're doing the right thing anyway and it fits into that program, that's the way to go. And carbon is just a segue or a stepping stone into a lot of other cool things that are coming. People bash the carbon deal because it's been crazy. I can tell you a lot of crazy about that deal, but we're getting to a lot of legitimate programs out there that want to do the right thing, that are really looking at it from a global perspective, but also building community. And that's what Agoro talks a lot about. Let's rebuild Main Street in this deal. We're all in this together.
And I think that approach is unique compared to Equip, which is taking the worst and making it okay. We're taking resource concerns. My biggest thing I looked at some Equip money. Well, he couldn't do it because it didn't have a resource concern. Well, what do you mean? Well, it's not a problem, so we're not going to help you to get it to the best. Now if you had a problem, so I'm like, okay, so if I create a problem, then I can get funding to make it better.
Yeah.
So
that sounds like
kind of a crazy, convoluted. Well, only the government can come up with that. But
right.
Nice part about this is, let's say you have good things going on, but you want to do better. But like you were saying, water is definitely on daily moves a limitation. So that can come in and help fund that to move from really good to best practices. Is that a good way to say it? And the private market is going to be there in multiple things in the future to help us do that. Is that a fair way to say that?
It is. And the cool thing about like Agoro, they're not selling anything, they're buying carbon. So they want you to be really successful. And that's why they brought a guy like me in and our team to figure out how we can sequester the most. Because the good part about it is if we're making your soil better, it's a win-win already. If you're getting a little money on top of that from doing more, that's really where we want to be with these people. And it's a game changer. There's some pretty big payments out there for these operations that want to go that way.
So what I wanted to move toward there was ESG, and that stands for environmental and social governance, which is becoming a part of a global trend. It's more popular in Europe, where European companies want to have a certain reporting on their balance sheets on their impact on the environment and social issues. And I think that's starting to trickle into, especially in large Fortune 500 companies here in America. And one of the troubles we run into in carbon is right now it's all practice-based, right, Del? It's like you do this, it is better, and we hope that corresponds to carbon deposition in the soil. Then you get Ray involved or other soil scientists involved, and you realize carbon is, they're labile and soluble, and there's all these carbon pools. It's in constant flux at different depths. It is a bear to quantify that the outcomes are getting what we think the inputs are going to give us, right? So there's this, at this moment in time, I mean, there's been billions of dollars spent on that. There's this disconnect between what we do and what actually happens. There's poor correlation. Now, over time, that'll get better, right? As better technology, sampling methods, computer modeling, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's some low-hanging fruit that, maybe you and me or a group of us need to put together to provide those KPIs, key performance indicators, or metrics along ESG that is other than carbon. So I think there's lots of things we can do with bird count diversity that can be easily monitored and censored. Your phone, there's apps that can tell you how many birds, male or female, what species, yada, yada, at any time. Get a hold of Dr. Lundgren and the folks at Ecdysis and have them come out and do, bug sampling, diversity, quantity, get a hold of plant diversity, quality, all those things, and water quality, stream measurements, all those things can be quantified today with the technology that we have, and the carbon will come, right? But what's your thoughts on that? Just throwing that out to you there, surprising you, giving you a little whiplash, but using other metrics other than just carbon for companies to meet and farms to meet their ESG goals or environmental and related goals. Because I personally think, just sorry to interrupt, but I personally think on my farm, 1/3 of the revenue per acre in the future will come from ecosystem services.
Oh, I totally agree. So back to carbon is a great start. And, the company we're with has got a very good verification process, as good as it can be now in a moving target type of world. So it's a component to everything you're just talking about. I am 100% in favor of really having that holistic model, and having a lot of different indicators in there. And I know why big companies can't do that, right from the start. I think that's another big reason why, Agoro partnered with Graze Master, knowing that things like this that we were going to be on top of, and we were going to be able to help them orchestrate how they move things like that into their program. So yeah, 100% spot on with all those things need to be taken into consideration, because nature is all those things. So if
all of those things are an indication of soil health, right? So while you
totally
can't look, it's hard to get all the bugs that are in the soil, but if you have all the plant life, insect life, bird life, and water quality are correct, then you can back assume that everything soil health is correct. See what I mean? It's
totally. So we get the soil, one of my biggest sayings is, we get the soil right, we change all society. Mm-hmm. Because touching the soil and everything we do with the soil, it gives us purpose, but it gives nature's purpose again to everything. We've stifled everything that was good and took off to the races on the craziest of things. It's like the 2 cows that, thank goodness, they're gone, but we focused on the 2 cows that we were so in love with, build our whole program around it. Oops, that wasn't what we should be doing. Anything that we can encompass as many different indicators or metrics into making the soil better, making the environment better. You bet all these companies that are looking to invest, they're watching all that. The heavy hitters, this whole deal is going to look so much different. And it's happening right now. And you tell farmers about this, it's like, there's a lot of money that's coming into agriculture now that's going to change, because they're going to want it to look this way or done this way. And, that it's kind of hard for them to believe. I'm all for it. I just, you figure out something, Monty, I'm on board with you. We'll promote it all over the world, because that's the kind of thought process we need in a very holistic way. I mean, our phrase, balancing nature and profitability at Graze Master, you can do both. You can have nature and you can be profitable.
Well said, Del. I really appreciate your time today. And I do appreciate the term that you are a soil romantic. And if you don't mind, I'm going to join you there too. I'm going to be a self-acclaimed soil romantic myself. I'll tell that to my wife. She'll probably get a big laugh out of that at least.
Well, wait till Valentine's Day. Wait till next week.
Right. I should probably be a spouse romantic then instead of soil.
Right. Right.
All right. Well, Dale, I appreciate it so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all of the risks that you've taken and the things that you discovered along the way. And I appreciate the impact that you're making, not only on your land, but in helping others on their land too.
You too, Monty. We appreciate the chance to be on anything like this. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. You all, you take care now, and well, I look forward to stopping by and visit. I've threatened many times, but I promise we're gonna be out there and walk pastures with you.
Perfect.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Dell's life experiences and the way he approaches challenges and examines solutions is a real encouragement as we look at ways we can change and improve our farming system. And as he says, he's a soil romantic. So how's your love for the soil today? Well, if you'd like to learn how we show soils we love them and what we're doing to help growers implement soil health practices, check out our website at asn.farm. And there you can click on links to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.